Well, thank you for having me as always. The reality is that Donald Trump is talking a big game, saying that tariffs, in fact, will cost the Chinese or the European partners or Canada or Mexico. Those countries will pay for it, and that's how tariffs work. When the reality is, tariffs don't work that way. As we all know, that when Trump puts on a tariff, the tariff is passed on to the consumer, which results in higher prices. Uh, Quite frankly, I'm not sure that Donald Trump and his economic advisors have thought about the possibilities of economic pressures that come when you start getting into a large scale trade war. It's hard enough to get on a trade war with just China, but when you mix in our European allies and then our two biggest trading partners,
Mm.
Canada and Mexico, that's a huge economic pressure that I don't think the Trump administration's thought out.
Now, the US administration has said, or it claims, that these tariffs will bring back American jobs. But history, as you said respectively, has shown that tariffs often lead to higher consumer costs and job losses. Now, will this time be of any difference, do you think?
Look, the Trump administration is going to have to deal with the reality of the fact that we are not the manufacturing nation that we were in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s. We are a country that depends on just in time logistics and gets a lot of our consumable products from overseas imports. That's why we have a trade deficit right now with most of our major trading partners, particularly countries like China and India.
Mm-hmm.
The reality now is that when we look at the effects of having a trade war with China, this has a global impact. For example, one of the theories that I think I've talked about on this show before is the idea of mutually assured economic destruction, where because the U.S. is so intertwined and so interdependent on the supplies that come from Far East manufacturers such as China, we expect to order it on Amazon and have it in 48 hours at our front door. And a lot of these are products that are made in Far East Asia, China, Korea, etc. The U.S. has also become used to the low price of those consumable goods. They've become used to buying cheap T-shirts on Temu
Mm.
or buying $200 flat screen TVs made in China on Amazon. When you start getting into a trade war like this, the mutually assured economic destruction is the Chinese need our money to buy their products in order to keep growing their economy in going neck and neck with us to try and be the biggest economy in the world. So they need that money. They can't afford to get into a large scale trade war with the US. The
Mm.
US can't afford it because if it does, and we can't manufacture those products, so that means that Americans aren't buying those products, which means that those are going to put the support jobs out of work that supply that transportation, logistics, etc. All those jobs are intertwined, and because we become such a global intertwined economy, it makes playing trade war with somebody as large a trading partner as we have with China very, very risky, not just to the economy, but to the political future of the Republican Party.
But Mr. Rosser, we're not talking anymore about cheap products. Now, China has already retaliated with tariffs on U.S. coal, crude oil, and rare earth metals. How might this trade war impact key American industries from your point of view here?
Well, again, if there's a tariff on those raw materials, and China, which uses a lot of them, if China does not buy them, there's not a huge market for some of these second tier markets to buy it. Well, if they're not producing and if they're not selling, there's no need to produce
But they
or
might,
garner.
yes, but
I'm sorry.
Mr. Rosser, they might take it from alternatives, other countries, for instance.
Sure,
Replace
sure.
that. Yeah.
No, 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 absolutely. But
Mm.
that is the risk that is got to be considered by the Trump administration. The idea that if the Chinese go to elsewhere, if the Chinese go to other alternatives for their raw materials, which there are, well, what does that do to the U.S. producers?
Mhm.
That means that there could be job losses and economic hardships in those industries. And the same thing goes with the U.S. We talk about the fact that one of the largest importers of American vehicles, in fact, is China. And China has a huge market, but if they're putting tariff and they're making Fords and Chryslers and Chevrolets way too expensive to acquire in China, that's a huge market that's going to impact the jobs, the workforce, and the economy of very, very key areas to Donald Trump, such as Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois, even into the Carolinas, where there's a lot of car manufacturing.
Mm.
This tariff, this mutual tariff suggestion that Donald Trump is putting out there, I think is placating more to his base. It's placating more to his campaign promises, but there's nothing really set to back up that this is a good idea for the U.S. workforce and the U.S. economy.
Right. But before the Biden administration has largely maintained Trump's tariffs during his term, showing bipartisan agreement on getting tough with China. But are tariffs truly an effective tool for rebalancing trade relations?
It can be, but you've got to have something to back it up. The the idea that you can just arbitrarily threaten tariffs, if somebody calls your bluff on that, and then you're in a real pickle. Excuse me. The idea that the idea that uh, the the mutual tariffs that we're talking about with other trading partners basically results in a situation where the economics don't necessarily, or the benefits, the cost benefits or the political benefits don't necessarily meet the measurement to be effective, especially if you're talking about the end result could be loss of jobs, it could be loss of economic development and economic sustainable growth. But here's the most important thing is, if you look, for example, what Donald Trump was talking about, yes, Joe Biden did in fact keep a lot of Trump's tariffs in place. And we can see what happened. The economy, although we had low unemployment numbers, and there was white hot economic growth in certain sectors, in large part, inflation went up. And a good part of that can be blamed on the fact that there was the tariffs that were placed on consumable goods that the U.S. routinely imports. If the inflation continues to go up, and Trump, remember, Trump ran in 2024 on a platform that he could drastically reduce inflation. Well, so far in his first month in office, inflation's gone up 3.2% since Biden left. So there's a lot of variables in this, and this is happening very quickly, very early in Trump's administration. And people like Peter Navarro are going to have to start really taking a hard look: is this an effective war that we want to fight?
Now, this trade war comes at a very critical time. It comes at the backdrop of the economy, the world economy, the global economy at large, uh, 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 um, so reeling from previous economic disruptions. Now, from your point of view, some experts argue rather that the real issue isn't China, but wealth inequality within the US. Now, could Trump's focus on trade wars be a distraction from addressing domestic economic disparities?
Now, I find that argument a little hard to digest, quite frankly.
Mm.
The U.S. the U.S. economic cycles are just that, cyclical. We've seen, the high of highs through, going from Jimmy Carter and we saw the challenges, the economic challenges that Jimmy Carter had into Reaganomics. At the end of the Reagan second term, it became very difficult. George H.W. Bush inherited, an economy where he ran on no new taxes. He
Mm,
inherited an economy that had to raise taxes.
mm.
So this is a very cyclical going through Obama and even into Trump, Biden, and now Trump again.
So,
That being said,
yes,
I'm going. Yeah, go ahead and ask.
just briefly, because I have only 1 minute left for me here. Do you think that this aggressive approach or this trade war could lead to another recession?
Possibly, possibly. I'm not an economist, but I will tell you that judging from what I'm seeing, judging from what we're seeing just in the first couple of weeks of the Trump administration, I think we could be very teetering on a very delicate situation that could lead to another recession similar to the economics that we
Right.
dealt with at the pandemic.